Hi, welcome back to my second episode of Roberta's Countdown to Retirement. So, I took a lot of time this week to think about what I want to do with this vlog. And part of it is sharing who I am, and that means reflecting on where I've been and all of life experience and how it made me who I am today. So, sometimes I said last week that I'll share travels I'm taking. A lot of that is often tied to the things I like, the fandoms I belong to. So I thought I should maybe explain today how I came to be this person that likes a lot of TV and movie and book stuff. So I'm just going to start. And I'm learning to use two screens here, so bear with me for a second. So I'm going to share. These are pictures of me as a small child. Um, these are my parents. Their names were Bob and Leota. And they were married for 14 years before I came along. They were trying very hard to have a child, and for medicine of the 1950s, they were told it was probably a 1 in a million chance that they were going to have a child. So imagine their surprise in the fall of 1959 when they were told they were having a baby. And here I came. What I should explain is that my parents were both children of the Depression. When I was born, my father was 44, my mother was 36. So I had older parents. Now, this little girl here, she had no problems. She had her parents who loved her deeply. They were strict, and I had high expectations because they came from a different era than the people I went to school with. And so while I was little, I had friends that I made in Sunday school. I've actually went to school with people that I have known since I was in cradle roll at Sunday school. And this little girl had friends, and she went to their houses and played. One of them their parents owned a dairy farm. I spent time at a dairy farm having great times in the hay bales and chasing cows and just having a great time. One of my friends, her parents managed the local church camp. We had run of that church camp. It was such a blast. There were so many pretend adventures we could do. But as we grew a little older, things changed. Being raised by parents who had really high expectations, while my friends were willing to had parents who were willing to let them be adventuresome and take chances, and do things that they wouldn't or I wouldn't think of. My parents had really high expectations, and they said with privilege came responsibility. So if I screwed up on a responsibility, then I was going to lose privileges. Well, I didn't want to lose my privileges. But as I got into middle school, I mean, look at this kid. What a geek, what a nerd. Horrible hairstyles, and I was a geek and a nerd. And back then in the 1970s, that wasn't a compliment like it is now. And so every time somebody laughed at me or made fun of me, called me teacher's pet because I did so well in school, well, I took it to heart. And I took it deep inside of me, and I would kind of built a shell around myself because it hurt, because the friends I'd had didn't think I fit in anymore. So I have one really good friend that I made in the second grade, and she was different too. So she was ostracized by folks. And so we just kind of built our own little twosome club. Now it looks like as I got into high school, if you go from the left to the right, that furthest left picture is me as a freshman. The one with the really bad perm is me as a sophomore. Me with I don't know what that was, junior year, and then my senior picture. So when I was in high school, it got even worse because now there were more people to make fun of me and laugh at me. And so I just kind of picked activities that where there was safe space. So band, there was a band room. there wasn't time for anybody to make fun of me, and I fit in there because I love music. I played the French horn, and I was really good at it, so that was cool. And for a little while, freshman year, I also learned how to play a valve trombone because they needed one in the German band. So I had some things I liked to do. I was in the choir, but I couldn't find any pictures of me in the choir. I was also in Future Business Leaders of America. The business teacher was a really cool lady named Mrs. McFeeters, and she had a safe space in her classroom at lunchtime and in between classes where someone like me could go. We took trips. Those were my first adventures to see that there was a much bigger world than the little world of Tillamook County. And that was really cool. And she taught us about some of the niceties of life, making us dress in nice clothes and go to good restaurants and learn how to behave. But the truth is, most of the time, what you'll see on that bottom picture is me in a corner I found in the library where I could sit in the sun and read because that was my passion then, was reading. So I learned how to find places to protect myself because what I learned was I couldn't fit in. I was different. I didn't like the same things everybody else liked, and I couldn't find anybody in my community that liked those same things. So I lived in my head through books and through television, and that's how I became even geekier and nerdier than I was. So that comes to one of my first loves, TV. And one of the first things I found was Oregon Public Broadcasting. I found that when I was about 11. It's not something my parents would ever watch, but we only had 4 stations. And I found it by accident one day on a Sunday afternoon when my parents weren't around, and they were playing Elizabeth R. with Glenda Jackson. It was a masterpiece theater, and I fell in love. I mean, it was so awesome. And one of the things I loved was history. So I watched the whole series of Elizabeth R., Elizabeth I's journey in life. I loved hearing Alistair Cook explain what was happening, and I got this real passion for Tudor history. So I read all the books I could on Tudor history and knew so much about Henry VIII and each of his 6 wives, a little bit about the War of the Roses and the Plantagenets and the Roses and the Lancasters, English history, and then Victorian history later. But that was my first introduction to OPB, and I'm still a strong fan of OPB. I love Oregon experience, history of my home state, things I never learned in school. One of my favorite things on Oregon Experience was a biography of Ken Kesey, who is my favorite author. One episode I'll share about books, and one of my favorite books is Ken Kesey's Sometimes a Great Notion. I've had at least 5 paperback copies that I've read and reread till they fall apart. Now I have a paperback copy and I have one on my Kindle because I just love that story. We'll talk about that later. I also love American Experience, where I get to see all kinds of American history that I also didn't learn in school and from textbooks, about the Kennedy era, the FDR era, the Teddy Roosevelt era, the Civil Rights Movement, Emmett Till. I mean, just amazing stories that no one ever taught me in school. I know them because of Oregon Public Broadcasting. And then, as you can tell, because I told you about Masterpiece Theater and Elizabeth R., I became, a long time ago, an Anglophile. I love all British television, and Oregon Public Broadcasting on Sundays and on Saturday nights is full of all kinds of public broadcasting of stuff from the BBC and from England. So right now I love Call the Midwife, All Creatures Great and Small, Grantchester, Inspector Morse, Inspector Lewis, Endeavor. Sean Evans was amazing in that. Inspector Lynnery Mysteries, Midsummer Mysteries, Agatha Christie's Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot, the Forsyte Saga, and I'm really excited a new section of that is coming soon. And Poldark, and all the Jane Austen works, Pride and Prejudice, and my favorites, Persuasion and Mansfield Park and Emma. Um, Broadchurch, all kinds of English stuff that I love to watch. Just, I love it. And down the bottom of those pictures, you'll see some new things I've found over the last year or so. Patience, it's British crime show about a young woman that's on the autism spectrum, and how she helps a police detective solve crimes because she's like the Rain Man of forensic science. And Traces, it's based in Scotland, and it's another forensics drama. I love it. And Professor T, again, kind of quirky, and I love it because somehow British television seems to have a bit more intelligence to me than American television. As you can see in my head, and I love these worlds because no one makes fun of me there. Now I did outgrow, but it took me a long time to outgrow it. So I love British television so much that as soon as I get my screen back, besides PBS, I watch BritBox because one of the things I fell in love with in 2005 was the new version of Doctor Who. But I've discovered all the old Doctor Who there on BritBox, and I love the old because one of the things I'll talk about is going to Doctor Who conventions. So I have Doctor Who geek people. And also on BritBox, whenever there's a royal event in England, I can find it on BritBox. I'm the girl that in 1980 got up at 2 in the morning to watch Lady Diana marry Prince Charles. I watched her funeral again, got up at 2 in the morning to watch Princess Diana's funeral, to watch the Golden Jubilee, the Silver Jubilee, Queen Elizabeth's funeral, and actually took as my heritage day from my job the King's coronation. That tells you what an Anglophile I am. England beckons me. It turns out when I did my Ancestry.com DNA, I have got English, Welsh, Scottish, Irish roots. And so somehow I think your DNA beckons you. I also watch Acorn TV because Midsummer Murders, all of the seasons are there. And I can watch the newest episodes when they come out there on Acorn TV because I love Midsummer Murders. Acorn TV also has a ton of Australian stuff, and one of my favorites is Under the Vines, about these two rather different people who end up jointly inheriting a vineyard. Neither one of them know a lot about a vineyard, and the vineyard's kind of run down, and it's an adventure they've had. So I love all these things. And you're saying, well, why? And I'll tell you. As I said, I grew up believing myself to be a geek, withdrawing, never being able to find my people, my tribe, as one of my friends lately says. But as I got into my 20s, I was still that way. And when we had our 10-year reunion from high school, all of the people had gone to school with, they were like doing college and getting married and having kids and getting these really good jobs, and that wasn't happening for me. Some other things had happened. It's another life experience that I'll talk about at some later time, but it wasn't happening for me, and I still didn't fit in. So it's hard to find your tribe when you live in a small community like I do, like I have always done here in Tillamook County, but it's what we do. But then I found the internet as the computer era came into being. And all of a sudden, all these things I loved, British film and television, books, I could find message boards where there were other people who liked the same things and we could have long conversations. Okay, so I didn't know them, I couldn't see them face to face, but nonetheless, all of a sudden I had people I could talk to about my favorite movies, about my favorite television, about what was happening on this episode or that episode or whatever was going on. It was really cool. And all of a sudden I realized I wasn't the only geek or nerd in the world. Now I didn't find that till I was in my 30s, and all of a sudden my shell started to come loose a little bit. And I could realize that being a geek or a nerd was not a bad thing. It was who I was. And this time of getting ready for retirement, I'm starting to do some reflection on where I've been, and the fact that I went through these things helps me understand when a young person feels like they don't fit in. And my empathy is awakened. And that's good because where I work, in the summer, I work with a lot of teenagers, and a lot of them feel like they don't fit, like they haven't found their place. But at least I can try to make a safe place for them at work and let them know that somebody cares about them and about what they're going through and what they're experiencing. So I wouldn't trade, at this point, I wouldn't trade the loneliness that I felt because I've come through it. And I found people eventually who accept me for who I am, not just on my message boards and lines, but I found a good church where there are other what we call quirky people. So they don't mind my quirks, and I don't mind their quirks. I love them, and they love me. And that helped me even more as I got into my 30s and 40s to break that shell and accept this is who I am. These are the things I like to do, and if I can't find somebody to do those things with me, then I'll go do them alone. I'll take trips to things I want, to conventions. I'll dress up and pretend because I gotta tell you, adulting sucks sometimes, and it doesn't hurt, even at 65, to pretend to be somebody else for a few hours at a convention. It's fun. You let go of all the stuff. If that's your thing, here's what I'm here to say. Go ahead and feel what you feel, do what you do, find people who will let you be who you are. It took me till I was in my 40s to be comfortable with that and to find people who will let me be who I am, who will accept me for who I am. One of the shows I loved on CBS was The Big Bang Theory because those fellows were proud of their geek and nerd. They let their flag fly. And that was well needed. And all of a sudden, geek and nerd were not bad things to be called. They were compliments. And so I'm going to take the compliment. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I like different things than the people around me like. I'm also a real tech person. I think was born out of my time. But that's okay. So that's what I wanted to say today is that you will hear a lot I will talk about TV shows, I will talk about books, I will talk about movies, I will talk about how I live that fandom stuff. Sometimes I'll share conventions I go to, which was one of the things I'm going to do next week for one of my fandoms. Didn't talk about today, but next week I will talk about one of my fandoms that I really am into. So, if you're out there and you're feeling like you haven't found your space, you can find it in a lot of ways. I'm here with in the comments. We can have conversations and talk about who we are and what we like, and it's something we can do. If you can find them locally, then get into them. Get into groups where there are people doing the things you like to do. Check it out, because usually on Facebook you can find groups. Sometimes they're local, sometimes they're not. If they're not local, go ahead and join the group and have conversations about your books, or have conversations with your favorite author. I've done that, and I'm hoping that I have a friend who's an author, and one of the things I'm hoping to do at some point is have her record an interview with me, and we'll share her books. But find your favorite author on Facebook or YouTube. Um, Use the internet if you can't find those things locally. If you find a local Facebook group that interests you, then they usually tell you where you can do get-togethers. Go ahead and do that. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You still have to be careful about where you go and how much you share, and you want to take care of security issues, but don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to find your place. Don't be afraid to be who you are. I'm really kind of sad that it took me so long to acknowledge that I'm finally feeling free enough to talk about it at 65. Why couldn't I have found my place much earlier? Except that I think it helps me be a much more understanding person to other people. So, that's my rant for today, and the things I've been reflecting on this week about who I am and where I've been. I'll be back next week it's 3 p.m. Western time, which means it's 5 o'clock in the Midwest and 6 o'clock on the East Coast. So if you're watching, yay. If you like what you're hearing, or if you think that I might say something that will help you or someone you know, please share the link to my video, and I'll be back next week. We'll see you then.